Most people believe they have a planning problem. They say they need better structure, better tools, better discipline. They think if they just find the right system, everything will finally click. But planning has never been the real problem. The real problem is that most plans are built without meaning. They are built around outcomes instead of purpose. They are built around what looks impressive instead of what feels true. They are built around what society rewards, not what the individual believes in. And when that happens, the plan looks solid on paper, but fragile in real life. Because the moment resistance appears, the plan starts to wobble. The moment energy drops, the plan feels heavy. The moment doubt creeps in, the plan feels optional. That's what happens when a plan has no why. A plan without a reason is just a wish with deadlines. Think about how often people say, I want to be successful. That sounds like a plan, but it's not. It's an outcome with no anchor. Successful at what? And more importantly, why does it matter? If the answer is money, approval, status, or comparison, the plan won't last because those things don't hold you up when things fall apart. They only excite you when things are going well. And plans are not tested when things are going well. They are tested when they aren't. The why is not a motivational phrase you write at the top of a notebook. It's not something you borrow from a quote or a speech. It's the deep, uncomfortable truth about what you believe is worth struggling for. And most people avoid that question because it demands honesty. It asks you to admit that some goals aren't really yours. It asks you to admit that some plans exist only to prove something to others. It asks you to admit that you've been chasing clarity instead of conviction. So instead of asking why, people plan faster. They create timelines. They break goals into steps. They optimize productivity. But speed without direction doesn't create momentum. It creates exhaustion. That's why so many people feel tired even when they're doing everything right. They're working hard on plans they don't actually believe in. When the why is missing, discipline feels forced. You need reminders, you need motivation, you need external pressure to keep going. And the moment that pressure disappears, so does progress. But when the why is clear, something shifts. You don't need to be convinced to act. You don't need constant encouragement. You don't need to negotiate with yourself every morning. You move because not moving feels wrong. This is why two people can have the same plan, the same resources, and the same opportunities, yet only one follows through. One is executing steps. The other is acting on belief. Belief changes how we interpret difficulty. Without belief, obstacles feel personal. They feel like signs. They feel like warnings that you should stop. With belief, obstacles feel expected. They feel like part of the journey. They feel like proof that what you're doing actually matters. That's the difference. Plans without a why collapse at the first sign of discomfort, because discomfort exposes the emptiness beneath them. You can't sacrifice for something you don't believe in. You can't stay consistent for something you don't respect. You can't endure uncertainty for something that only exists on the surface. This is why people keep restarting. New year, new plan, new notebook, new routine, new promise, same pattern. They think the failure was in the execution, but the failure was in the foundation. They never stop to ask, why does this matter to me when no one is watching? Not when it's exciting, not when it's new, not when it's praised, but when it's boring, when it's lonely, when it's hard. A strong why doesn't eliminate fear. It gives fear context. You still feel doubt. You still feel uncertainty. But those feelings no longer decide for you. Because the plan isn't fueled by emotion. It's fueled by meaning, and meaning doesn't fluctuate with mood. This is also why many people overplan. They keep refining, adjusting, rethinking. They tell themselves they're being careful, but they're actually avoiding commitment, because once you define your why, excuses lose power. You can no longer say, I'm not ready, when readiness isn't the point. You can no longer say, I'll wait, when waiting contradicts what you claim to believe. So people delay clarity on purpose. They call it strategy. They call it patience. But it's fear dressed as preparation. A real plan doesn't start with what. It doesn't start with how. It starts with the courage to say, this matters to me enough to try, enough to be seen failing, enough to be uncomfortable, enough to be misunderstood. Because the strongest plans are not logical first. They are emotional first. Logic helps us organize steps. But belief is what makes us take them. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you can't clearly explain why your plan matters to you, you won't defend it when it's challenged. You'll abandon it the moment someone doubts you, you'll water it down to fit in, you'll quietly replace it with something easier, not because you were weak, but because the plan was never rooted deeply enough. So before you add another task, another goal, another timeline, pause. Ask yourself one honest question. If no one ever applauded this, if no one ever noticed, if this never made me look successful, would I still believe it was worth doing? If the answer is no, the plan isn't broken, it's misaligned, and alignment always comes before execution, because when your plans are built on a real why, they stop needing constant repair, they stop relying on motivation, they stop collapsing under pressure. They don't just tell you where you're going, they remind you why you started, especially when you feel like stopping. And that's when a plan stops being something you manage and starts becoming something you live. Most people believe they are planning for success, but if you look closely, they are actually planning for comfort. They imagine best-case scenarios. They picture smooth progress, supportive people, steady motivation. They design their plans around days when they feel confident, energized, and inspired. But life does not cooperate with ideal conditions. Life interrupts, it distracts, it disappoints. And when it does, most plans quietly fall apart. Not because they were impossible, but because they were never designed to survive reality. A comfortable plan assumes clarity will come before action. A committed plan understands clarity often comes because of action. That difference changes everything. Comfort-based planning asks, what feels manageable right now? Commitment-based planning asks, what am I willing to stand by even when it hurts? And most people avoid that second question because it demands ownership. When plans are built for comfort, they rely heavily on motivation. They work when energy is high. They move forward when encouragement is available. They feel exciting in the beginning. But motivation is emotional, and emotions fluctuate. So when the excitement fades, as it always does, the plan begins to feel optional. Suddenly, discipline feels harsh, consistency feels restrictive, and quitting starts to feel like self-care. This is why people say, I lost motivation, when what they really lost was commitment. Commitment does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you believe. Belief says, this matters even now. Belief says, this is still worth doing, even if it's uncomfortable. Belief says, I don't need to feel ready to continue. Comfort avoids discomfort. Commitment expects it. And yet, many people confuse discomfort with danger. They feel resistance and assume something is wrong. They feel uncertainty and assume they should stop. They feel fear and assume they are not capable. But discomfort is not a signal to retreat. It's often a signal that growth is happening. The problem is not that plans become hard. The problem is that people didn't plan for hardness. They planned for convenience. They planned for support. They planned for confidence. They planned for approval. But they did not plan for loneliness. They did not plan for doubt. They did not plan for the long stretches where progress is invisible. And when those moments arrive, the plan has no defense. This is why busy people often feel stuck. They are doing many things, but avoiding the one thing that requires commitment. They stay active because activity feels productive, but activity without direction is just motion. It looks impressive from the outside. It feels exhausting on the inside. Commitment changes how we use our time. Instead of asking, what can I fit in? We ask what deserves priority. Instead of filling schedules, we protect focus. Instead of chasing balance, we choose alignment because commitment forces trade-offs. You can't commit without saying no. You can't move forward without leaving something behind. You can't grow without letting go of who you used to be. That's uncomfortable. And comfort-based plans avoid discomfort by keeping all options open. They leave room to quit gracefully. They allow for easy exits. They maintain the illusion of control. But plans that keep every door open rarely walk through any. Commitment closes doors on purpose. Not recklessly, but intentionally. It says, this is what I'm choosing, even if it costs me. It says, I don't need a backup for my belief. It says, I would rather be wrong than indecisive. And that level of commitment scares people. Because once you commit, you can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer blame timing. You can no longer hide behind potential. You are responsible. And responsibility is heavy when you're used to comfort. This is also why people over-prepare. They tell themselves they're being strategic, but they're actually stalling. They keep researching. They keep refining. They keep waiting for certainty. But certainty is not a prerequisite for commitment. It is often the result of it. Confidence grows after action, not before. Clarity sharpens through experience, not contemplation. Commitment means you move forward without full visibility, not blindly, but bravely. You take the next step knowing you may need to adjust later. You accept that mistakes are part of progress. You trust that learning will come from doing. Comfort wants guarantees. Commitment accepts responsibility. And here's the deeper truth. Many people are not afraid of failing. They are afraid of committing and still failing. Because failure without commitment can be explained away, but failure after commitment feels personal. So people hedge, they give partial effort, they stay ambiguous, they keep one foot out the door, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But transformation requires full presence. You cannot half commit to a belief. You cannot selectively endure discomfort. You cannot grow while protecting every version of yourself. Commitment reshapes identity. You stop asking, do I feel like it today? And start asking, is this who I am becoming? And when plans are built on that question, consistency stops feeling forced. You don't need motivation to show up for what you believe in. You don't need reminders to protect what matters. You don't need pressure to stay the course. Why? Oh, show up because that's who you are now. That doesn't mean it gets easy. It means it gets honest. Some days you move slowly. Some days you doubt yourself. Some days you wonder if it's worth it. But you don't quit, because quitting would contradict your values. And values are heavier than feelings. So if your plans keep collapsing, don't ask what's wrong with your discipline. Ask what they're built to protect. Are they protecting your comfort or your future? Are they designed to avoid pain or to pursue meaning? Are they keeping you busy or moving you forward? Because plans don't fail when life gets hard. They fail when they were designed for a life that doesn't exist. Commitment designs for reality. It expects resistance. It anticipates fear. It accounts for discomfort. And it moves anyway. Not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's aligned. And alignment doesn't need motivation. It needs courage. The courage to choose discomfort over regret, the courage to commit before certainty, the courage to build plans that don't just fit your life, but shape it. Most people don't lack ambition, they lack direction. So they stay busy, they fill their calendars, they chase productivity, they measure their days by how much they got done. And from the outside it looks impressive. But busyness is a clever disguise. It hides uncertainty, it hides fear, it hides the uncomfortable truth that movement is not the same as progress. Progress requires intention. Busyness only requires effort. You can move fast in the wrong direction and still feel productive. You can exhaust yourself and still remain exactly where you started. And many people do. They confuse motion with meaning. They wake up early, they stay late, they respond quickly, they say yes often, but they never stop to ask, why am I doing all of this? Because that question threatens the illusion. If you never pause, you never have to confront whether your effort is aligned. If you never slow down, you never have to admit that some actions are distractions. If you stay busy enough, you can avoid the fear of choosing wrong. And fear plays a larger role in planning than most people are willing to admit. Not loud fear, not obvious fear, quiet fear, the fear of being judged, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of committing to something and discovering you're not good at it, the fear of choosing one path and closing another. So instead of choosing, people stack tasks. They plan around what feels responsible. They plan around what looks sensible. They plan around what keeps them occupied. But safe plans rarely lead anywhere new. Fear doesn't stop people from acting. It redirects their action. It pushes them toward low-risk tasks. It encourages them to stay in familiar territory. It convinces them that preparation is progress. And preparation can feel productive for a very long time. You can research endlessly. You can refine indefinitely. You can improve systems without ever confronting purpose. Because purpose demands courage. Purpose asks you to say, this matters more than that. Purpose forces you to prioritize meaning over approval. Purpose requires you to disappoint some people, including versions of yourself. So fear reshapes plans to avoid those costs. It tells you to keep options open. It tells you to stay flexible. It tells you not to rush decisions, and flexibility is valuable until it becomes avoidance. When plans are shaped by fear, they tend to grow wider instead of deeper. More tasks, more goals, more possibilities, but no real commitment. And without commitment, nothing compounds. Progress is built on depth, on repetition, on staying with something long enough for it to change you. Fear resists that. Fear prefers variety because variety offers escape. If one thing gets hard, you can pivot. If one direction feels uncertain, you can reframe. And slowly, without realizing it, your plans become less about where you're going and more about what you're avoiding. Avoiding failure, avoiding judgment, avoiding the discomfort of focus. Focus is dangerous to fear because focus removes excuses. When you focus, you can no longer say you didn't have time. When you focus, you can no longer hide behind busyness. When you focus, the results or lack of them become clear, and clarity can be confronting. That's why so many people live in perpetual motion. They attend meetings that don't matter. They chase metrics that don't reflect meaning. They celebrate progress that doesn't move them closer to who they want to become. They feel tired but not fulfilled, busy but not proud, accomplished but strangely empty, because progress without purpose feels hollow. Real progress is not loud. It doesn't always look impressive. It often feels uncomfortable. It requires saying no to good things so you can say yes to the right things. It requires slowing down long enough to choose direction. It requires tolerating the anxiety of focus. And fear resists all of that. Fear says, do more, purpo. Say says, do what matters. Fear says, stay active. Purpose says, stay aligned. Fear says, don't stop. Purpose says, pause and choose. When fear drives planning, success becomes defined by output, by how much you produce, by how much you complete. When purpose drives planning, success becomes defined by impact, by what actually changes, by who you become in the process. And those two definitions rarely lead to the same choices. Busy plans are reactive. They respond to demands, expectations, and noise. They are shaped by urgency instead of importance. Purpose-driven plans are intentional. They respond to values. They are shaped by belief instead of pressure, and belief simplifies. It cuts through options. It clarifies priorities. It makes decisions easier, even when they are hard. That's why people who know what they believe often appear calm. Not because their lives are easy, but because their direction is clear. They are not doing more. They are doing less on purpose. They understand that every yes is a trade-off, that every commitment costs something, that every focused plan requires letting go of alternatives, and they accept that cost. Fear avoids cost. Purpose embraces it. So if your plans feel crowded, if your days feel full but unfocused, if you're exhausted yet unsure what you're building, it's not because you lack discipline. It's because fear has been allowed to design your plans. Not in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones, by keeping you busy instead of brave, by encouraging motion instead of meaning, by rewarding activity instead of alignment. And the way out is not to do more. It's to choose. Choose direction over distraction. Choose depth over variety. Choose progress that feels uncomfortable over busyness that feels safe. Because fear will always offer you something to do, but purpose offers you somewhere to go. And once you choose direction, busyness loses its power. You no longer need to fill your time to feel valuable. You no longer need to prove effort through exhaustion. You no longer need to hide behind movement. Your plans become quieter, clearer, more demanding, and more honest. They stop asking, how much can I handle? And start asking, what actually matters? And that question changes everything, because the moment your plans are driven by purpose instead of fear, busyness fades, and progress finally begins. Most people believe their plans are guided by logic. They tell themselves they're being realistic, practical, responsible. They say they've weighed the risks, considered the timing, analyzed the options. But if you look closely, many of those decisions were not shaped by logic at all. They were shaped by fear, not the obvious kind. Not panic or anxiety or doubt that announces itself loudly. Quiet fear. The kind that sounds reasonable, the kind that disguises itself as caution, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. Fear doesn't tell you to stop. It tells you to adjust. It nudges you to aim a little lower. It encourages you to wait a little longer. It convinces you to choose the safer version of the dream, and because it sounds sensible, most people never question it. They believe they are being strategic, when in reality, they are being protective. Fear rarely asks, "What do you want?" It asks, "What can you afford to lose?" So plans become smaller. Timelines become flexible. Commitments become conditional. Not because the vision disappeared, but because fear quietly took the steering wheel. Vision is bold by nature. It sees possibility before proof. It imagines outcomes before permission. Fear does the opposite. Fear scans for threats. It anticipates criticism. It plans for rejection before it plans for success. And when fear leads, plans are designed to minimize embarrassment rather than maximize impact. You see this in how people talk about their goals. They soften their language. They add disclaimers. They leave room to retreat. "I'm thinking about trying. I might do this if it works out. I'll see how it goes." These are not signs of humility. They are signs of self-protection, because committing fully makes failure visible. And fear hates visibility, so it reshapes vision into something easier to abandon. Fear also has a powerful influence on what people choose not to plan. They avoid paths that require vulnerability. They delay decisions that demand courage. They skip conversations that could create clarity. Instead, they plan around what keeps them comfortable. They choose goals that are socially acceptable. They pursue progress that earns approval. They chase outcomes that can be explained away if they fail. And slowly, without realizing it, their plans drift away from what they actually care about. Fear does not erase vision. It edits it. It removes the risky parts. It tones down the ambition. It replaces conviction with caution. And because the plan still looks productive, the compromise goes unnoticed until something feels off. People start feeling restless, unfulfilled, disconnected from our own effort. They're doing what they planned, but the plan doesn't feel alive. Because vision energizes, fear drains, vision pulls you forward, fear holds you back while pretending to guide you safely. This is why plans shaped by fear often require constant reassurance. They need validation, they need encouragement, they need proof that they're working, because fear does not trust the future, it demands guarantees. Vision, on the other hand, accepts uncertainty. It understands that not everything can be predicted, that not every risk can be controlled, that some outcomes only reveal themselves after commitment. Fear asks for certainty before action. Vision grows through action despite uncertainty, and this creates a fundamental tension. If fear is in charge, action is delayed. If vision is in charge, action creates clarity. That's why people stuck in fear-based planning often feel trapped in thinking. They analyze, they reconsider, they refine. They believe they are being thoughtful, but they are actually being cautious. Because thinking feels safer than doing. Doing exposes you. Doing invites judgment. Doing creates results that can't be hidden. So fear encourages endless preparation. It tells you there's still something you don't know, that you're not quite ready, that waiting is the responsible choice. And waiting feels harmless until years pass. Vision does not wait for perfect conditions. It moves forward knowing conditions will never be perfect. Vision understands that confidence is not a requirement, it is a byproduct. Fear misunderstands this. Fear believes confidence must come first, so it keeps you stuck, waiting to feel ready. But readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. And fear resists decisions because decisions eliminate escape routes. Once you choose, you can no longer hide behind potential. Once you choose, your effort becomes measurable. Once you choose, the outcome matters. So fear keeps options open. It designs plans that are reversible. It avoids commitments that feel final. It values flexibility over direction. But plans that can be abandoned easily often are. Vision commits, not recklessly, but intentionally. It chooses a direction and accepts the risk. It understands that discomfort is not failure, it's feedback. It values progress over protection. And here's the most important difference. Fear asks, what if this doesn't work? Vision asks, what if this matters? Fear focuses on loss. Vision focuses on meaning. Fear imagines embarrassment. Vision imagines impact. And the question you prioritize. determines the plan you build. If your plans are shaped by fear, they will keep you safe, but small. If your plans are shaped by vision, they may feel uncomfortable, but alive. This doesn't mean ignoring risk. It means not allowing fear to be the primary decision maker. Because fear is useful as a warning, but destructive as a leader, it should inform your plans, not define them. The moment fear becomes the architect, your plans stop reflecting who you want to become and start reflecting what you're trying to avoid. Avoiding failure, avoiding judgment, avoiding regret in the short term. But avoidance has a cost. The cost is stagnation. The cost is misalignment. The cost is the quiet regret of knowing you played it safe when you wanted more. So if your plans feel cautious, if they feel overly reasonable, if they feel designed to protect rather than pursue, it's worth asking a hard question. Is this plan driven by vision or by fear pretending to be logic? Because vision may not guarantee success, but fear guarantees limitation. And the goal of a meaningful plan is not to avoid failure. It's to build something worth believing in, even if it scares you. When vision leads, fear doesn't disappear. It just loses authority. And that's when your plans stop shrinking and start pointing you somewhere that actually matters. Most people believe motivation is the fuel that moves plans forward. They wait for it, they chase it, they blame its absence when progress slows. But motivation was never meant to carry something heavy. Motivation is emotional. It comes in waves. It responds to excitement, novelty, and recognition. And plans that depend on motivation are fragile by design. They work when you feel inspired. They move forward when energy is high. They collapse the moment reality becomes dull, difficult, or repetitive. That's why so many plans start strong and fade quietly. Not because the idea was wrong, not because the goal was unrealistic, but because motivation was mistaken for commitment. Commitment is different. Motivation asks, how do I feel today? Commitment asks, what do I believe? Feelings change, beliefs endure. When plans are built on motivation, discipline feels like force. You have to push yourself, you have to negotiate, you have to convince yourself to keep going, and every day becomes a debate. But when plans are built on belief, discipline feels natural, not easy, but inevitable. You don't argue with yourself about brushing your teeth. You don't need motivation to protect something you value. You don't wait to feel inspired to show up for what matters. Belief removes the debate. This is why people with strong belief systems appear consistent. They're not more disciplined. They're not more motivated. They've simply decided what matters enough to endure discomfort for. Belief gives plans weight. It turns actions into expressions of identity. It transforms habits into values in motion. It connects effort to meaning, and meaning is what sustains momentum when motivation disappears. Because motivation always disappears. Every plan enters a phase where excitement fades, where progress slows, where results lag behind effort. This phase is unavoidable, and it's where belief is tested. Without belief, this phase feels like failure. With belief, it feels like part of the process. Belief reframes struggle. It tells you discomfort is not evidence of inadequacy. It tells you boredom is not a reason to quit. It tells you resistance is not a sign you chose wrong. It tells you that endurance matters more than enthusiasm. This is why people who rely on motivation keep restarting. They search for a new plan, a new routine, a new system. They believe the answer is novelty, but novelty only postpones the problem. Eventually, every plan B comes ordinary, and when it does, belief is the only thing that keeps it alive. Belief also changes how we define success. Motivation-focused plans chase visible wins. They seek quick validation. They need progress that can be measured immediately. Belief-focused plans prioritize consistency. They value showing up. They measure success by alignment rather than applause. This shift matters. Because when success is defined by outcomes alone, setbacks feel devastating, but when success is defined by staying true to belief, setbacks become information. You learn, you adjust, you continue. Belief creates resilience. It allows you to fail without quitting. It allows you to rest without abandoning the plan. It allows you to adapt without losing direction. Motivation cannot do that. Motivation is reactive. Belief is grounded. Motivation responds to external conditions. Belief is anchored internally. That's why plans built on belief don't require constant reminders. They don't need vision boards or hype. They don't rely on external pressure. They are sustained by identity. When belief becomes identity, action follows naturally. You don't ask, should I do this? You ask, who am I becoming if I don't? And that question carries weight. Belief also simplifies decision-making. When you know what you stand for, choices become clearer. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't say yes to everything. You filter. Does this align with what I believe? Does this move me closer to the person I want to become? If not, you let it go. This is why belief-driven plans often look boring from the outside. They are repetitive. They're focused. They lack drama, but they compound. Small actions repeated consistently create momentum. And momentum builds confidence, not the other way around. Belief is not blind optimism. It does not deny difficulty. It does not ignore risk. It does not guarantee success. Belief simply says, this is worth the effort regardless of outcome. And that mindset is powerful because it frees you from needing proof to continue. You don't stop when progress is invisible. You don't quit when recognition is absent. You don't panic when timelines stretch. You keep going because stopping would betray what you believe. And here's the truth most people avoid. If you need motivation to keep going, you don't believe deeply enough yet. That's not a judgment. It's a signal that the plan needs realignment, because belief is not something you fake. It's something you clarify. You build belief by asking better questions. Why does this matter to me? What does this say about who I am? What kind of person follows through on this? When plans answer those questions, they stop feeling optional. They become personal. And personal plans don't need hype. They need honesty. They need patience. They need consistency. They need the courage to keep going without applause. Motivation will still visit from time to time. It will still energize you on good days, but it will no longer be in charge. Belief will, and when belief leads, plans stop breaking under pressure. They bend, they adapt, they survive, not because they're easy, but because they're rooted in something deeper than emotion. So if your plans keep stalling, don't ask where your motivation went. Ask what you truly believe, because motivation can start a plan, but only belief can carry it all the way through. So when you look back at your plans, past and present, the real question is no longer whether they were detailed enough, ambitious enough, or realistic enough. The real question is whether they were built on something strong enough to last. Plans fail when they are built on emotion instead of belief. They fail when they are shaped by fear instead of vision. They fail when they prioritize comfort, busyness, and approval over meaning. And none of that makes you weak. It makes you human. We live in a world that celebrates quick wins, visible success, and constant movement. We are taught to chase motivation, to stay busy, to look productive, even when we are drifting. But meaningful progress has never been about speed. It has always been about direction. Direction comes from belief. Belief gives plans weight. Belief gives discomfort a purpose. Belief turns effort into identity. When belief is missing, plans feel negotiable. They bend under pressure. They disappear when excitement fades. But when belief is present, plans stop needing permission. They stop relying on perfect conditions. They stop collapsing when life gets hard, because hard was expected. The goal was never to create a plan that feels good every day. The goal was to create a plan that still matters on the days when nothing feels good at all. That's the difference between planning to feel successful and planning to become someone you respect. Meaningful plans don't eliminate fear. They simply refuse to let fear lead. They acknowledge uncertainty, but they don't wait for it to disappear. They move forward not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the direction is aligned, and alignment changes how you show up. You stop asking, am I motivated enough today? You start asking, is this consistent with who I want to be? You stop measuring progress by applause. You start measuring it by integrity. You stop restarting every time things get hard. You start enduring long enough for growth to happen. This is where real confidence comes from, not from winning, not from recognition, but from knowing that your actions match your beliefs. That even when no one is watching, you are still moving in the right direction. So if your plans have failed before, don't rush to replace them. Pause instead. Examine what they were built on. Ask yourself if they were designed to protect you or to transform you. Because plans designed for safety keep you comfortable. Plans designed for belief change who you become. And the most powerful plans are not loud. They are not dramatic. They don't need constant motivation to survive. They are quiet, steady, and deeply personal. They are carried by belief. When belief leads, you don't just follow a plan, you live it. And when you live it, failure loses its power, fear loses its voice, and progress becomes inevitable. Not because it's easy, but because it finally matters.